no regrets, no confusion. There'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways.
Welcome back to the Leaving Eden podcast. This is a fun episode that we have today. We're recording an episode where we are reading your Rapture trauma. Not ours, not Sadie's.
Well, maybe some of mine. We'll see if this gets my podcasting trauma, because I am recording while sick. And I was so sick when we recorded the Josh Duggar breaking news verdict episode, I think it was.
Yes.
And people were upset at me for being sniffly and sick, and now I'm so sensitive about recording when I'm sick.
There was one person that was so mean about that, who was just like, this is unprofessional. And I'm like,
we're not professionals.
This is, I mean, technically this is our profession, but you know, it was like, this is breaking news. Do you want me to, like, everybody wants it now. Do you want us to wait until Monday to record this, and then all of the news that will have happened, and then we're going to, you know, get scooped by everyone else? They're going to have I mean, that's kind of what, it's just, people are just like, I didn't like it because you were, well, cool.
Like, I get that I sounded gross, but I didn't have a problem with people saying, oh, hey, Sadie, you sound gross. Please don't do that again. It was the tone of these comments was so nasty.
I don't know. I feel like people who their hobby is making fun of famous people on the internet are also not necessarily always going to be the most compassionate people to people that create content that they consume as well.
That's fair.
I think that's a fair read on some people, not all of them. A lot of you guys are snarkers who are very compassionate and kind-hearted people, and I don't mean to paint you with the same brush as the same type of people who would be mean to Sadie because she happened to record a podcast episode with a cold. How dare she? My name is Gabrielle Hacohen. I'm here with my BFF and co-host, cult expert, cult survivor, Sadie Carpenter. Today, as I said earlier, we're talking your Rapture trauma. Not mine, not Sadie's. I don't have Rapture trauma.
Yet.
It feels amazing. Jesus, that was ominous. Woo. My Rapture trauma is when I get left behind.
Yeah, but I keep telling you, like, you've heard the gospel, so when you get left behind, so you did pray the prayer in the Break the Script episode. So if that took, then you're not going to get left behind. If that didn't take, when you get left behind, you're going to be hit with a strong delusion and you're not going to be able to get saved. So what I would suggest is hoard water, find a bomb shelter, and live it up.
The real question here is if it's magic words or if it's meted in my heart. If it's magic words, then I'm fine. If it's meted in my heart, then I'm totally screwed.
I don't.
But before we get into that, the Leaving Eden podcast is the podcast about my BFF and co-host, cult expert, cult survivor, Sadie Carpenter, her life in and escape from the Independent Fundamental Baptist cult, the cult in which she was raised, also known as the IFB, the International... I wanted to say Waffle House because there's two F's in Waffle House.
You're trying to make an IHOP joke?
Yeah, I'm trying to make an IHOP joke, but it's the IFB, Independent Fundamental Baptists. We talk about this cult, we talk about other cults, we talk about religion, we talk about fundamentalism, we talk about the real and present threat that cults and cult ideologies pose to society as a whole, and it is our goal to promote freedom of mind, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. If you're a fan of this show, if you like this show, then you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Leaving Eden Podcast. You can join our Facebook group and our subreddit. Both of those are called Eden Exodus. Great place to have the discussion. Oh, Patreon is where we drop the episodes a couple of days early. Also, they're extended, uncensored, ad-free, so there's bonus content on there for you if you want to. And also, if you just want to support the show, then that's a great way to do that. And we give you a thumbs up if you want to support us financially in that way. I gave it all to your patrons. Your names are Kathleen Moncrief, Melissa Manown, Melora King, and Todd Dale on behalf of his lovely Deconstructor Renex of a partner, Madeline Antrim. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to the I Gave It All tier of our Patreon.
Yes, big thank you to the I Gave It All tier patrons.
We really do appreciate it. Faith Promise Missions tier patrons. Your names are Hope Norum, Alex P., Alicia Guile, Allie Allen, Chrissa Walker, Dora J., Eleanor Donahue, Hannah Ross, Horton Here's a Shane, Janine Collin, Jana Connor, Jen Kaharski, Jessica Tambo, Jonna, Junie B. Jones, and the B stands for Backstreet's Back, all right. Kat Henwood, Kay Terwee, Kristen Marie, Learned Vixen, Linda Morgan, Madeline Antrim, Madeline Cusick, Maddie the Seventh Day Badventist, Mary Martin, Maybe I'm 1010, or maybe not, Megan Arendt, Rob the Methodist, Stephanie Johnson, Steve and Amy, Susie, Tara McNamara, and Wes the Cowboy. Oh, and also Zoe Shuck. I'm so used to saying and Wes the Cowboy, but there's another one after Wes the Cowboy alphabetically. Thank you guys so much for subscribing at the Faith Promise Missions tier of our Patreon.
Thank you to everybody who subscribes on Patreon at any amount. And thank you to people who contribute to our show in non-financial ways, recommending us to friends and family, posting about us on social media, leaving positive reviews wherever you get your podcasts. All of those things are direct contributions, and we appreciate them. In general, we talk about a lot of potentially triggering topics on this show, including but not limited to suicide and mental health, racism, misogyny, PTSD and PTSD symptoms, child abuse, mental, physical, and sexual abuse, and spiritual abuse, including guilt, shame, and fear. In most episodes, we will mention at least a few of these topics, but we try very hard to avoid graphic detail unless it's relevant to the story that we're telling, and we do our best to give the audience a heads up before we go into detail on any of these topics. This episode in particular features discussion of eating disorder behavior and fasting, in addition to all of the regular things that you would expect being associated with the Rapture, the Book of Revelation, and end times.
So we have some Rapture stories or Rapture trauma stories, end of times, end of days, Revelation, whatever, if you've got a story about growing up with these beliefs, then you've sent it to us. We have unfortunately not been able to include every single person's stories that we received because we actually just got too many.
There's a lot of Rapture trauma out there.
We tried to pick stories that we felt like were representative of the different kinds of Rapture trauma that people had. And so we did, if there was something that was like way different from everything else, then we tried to select that. I don't want to say we tried not to have repeats because I don't want to act like everybody, like people's experiences are repeats of each other's, because I think that's disrespectful, but we tried to have a variety in there. Yeah,
and these have a lot of really different experiences from mine. And of course, we want you to know that if you sent in your story, we read that. We just didn't have time to put every single one in the podcast episode.
So do you want to read the first one? Do you want me to read the first one?
Why don't you go ahead and read the first one?
So this one is from an anonymous listener who says, there was a time when a parent I will not mention bought into someone telling him that he must fast in order to be saved. The torment associated with the scripture Rapture, end of days, the parent fasting for over 30 days, and the instruction to follow suit or else. I often wake up worried that my friends and loved ones were raptured and I was left behind. It started when I was 10-ish. P.S. I am okay now, and I have a great clinical support system. I'm sorry that you had that trauma.
Yeah.
That sounds very difficult, but I'm wondering from a practical perspective what the logistics of this is. You see what I'm saying?
I think I see where you're going here.
Because, like, if you've got to fast for 30 days before you get saved, then... like, what happens if you're 2 weeks into your fast and the rapture comes? Is it like swimming where you can't go in the water within 30 minutes of eating? Or like if you get raptured up to heaven, does all the food that was in your belly get left behind?
That doesn't seem like that would be the consequence, because I assume after you've completed your 30-day fast, you get to go back to eating until such time as the rapture occurs.
But does the food get raptured up with you when you get raptured? I
don't think this is about the food getting raptured. I think this is about you getting raptured, but I would be really concerned if someone did 15 days of their 30-day fast, if half of them would be raptured.
I just imagined it like raining Chick-fil-A nuggets on us when all the people get zoomed up, but the food gets left behind, so it starts raining Chick-fil-A nuggets.
Are you assuming that saved people don't chew?
I don't know. Maybe.
I'm not sure. There was an extended fasting trend in the IFB when I was growing up, but this seems to be a different thing.
Was that Jack Scop?
It was, yeah, Jack Scop and Kenny were doing 30-day or 40-day fasts. My youth pastor did one, and he did actually fast. He was on only liquids, but he did drink Mountain Dew during his fast, if I remember correctly.
You do need a certain number of calories in order for your body to not shut down. And so Mountain Dew does have the required calorie density in order to... But I can't imagine that would be particularly good for somebody's health.
Yeah, I don't think so. He did also refeed himself after his fast with like a massive plate of hamburgers and potato salad and whatever else, which is not what you're supposed to do. But he lived, so.
I think that refeeding syndrome is something that, and we've talked about this before, and somebody I think corrected me because I was like worried about it. And I think that it's like, it has to be over a longer period of time. Like you have to be chronically starved. I think, you know what I think it was? I think it was like when we did the Brittany Dawn thing. Okay. Somebody sent me a correction saying that refeeding syndrome isn't a concern in that situation because it has to be longer term and much more. Still, like the fasting thing, especially Jack Scop has like stomach issues. I can't imagine that would be.
Well, his stomach issues, yeah, that made him commit a federal crime. It's really interesting, like thinking back on that, having come so far in my own understanding of health and bodies in general, knowing so much more about it than I did back then, having that perspective of how unhealthy that is.
And like your body will just like shut down or stop working properly if you don't eat, if you don't feed it.
Like there's no reason not to short term choose to, I mean, some people choose to go off carbs short term, and doing that long term will mess up your kidneys eventually. But there's no reason you're not going to die if you don't eat a carb for a week. You'll be fine. You'll be grumpy, but you'll be fine. But like this, like actual fasting for 30 days or the extreme methods that are encouraged with no medical supervision in evangelical Christianity is actually kind of frightening when you think about it.
My thought on this is that if I get like an anxiety attack or something, if I'm feeling high anxiety, probably 60-70% of the time, if I eat something, then my body will be like, okay, you're doing okay, and it'll calm down. Or if I get one, it will be because I've like not eaten, and I've been focused on something else and I've forgotten to eat breakfast or eat lunch or something like that. So I'm trying to imagine if I was like intentionally starving myself for 30 days or eating only liquids for 30 days, then I can only imagine that like I would just be like hyper anxious, hyper vigilant. And if I was in a religious movement that encouraged the hyper vigilance about the apocalypse, about the rapture, about the end of days, that seems like that would be like mental torture.
And it sounds like in this particular case, it may have been a parent encouraging a child to join in on this, which is obviously levels and layers worse.
I know. And I know people who like have dealt with like eating disorder behavior, and they had parents that encouraged eating disorder behavior when they were kids. And that's sort of like part of their, the issues that they have with it. I'm trying to imagine if you have parents who are encouraging that behavior based on like, and then adding the religious trauma component on top of that, that seems like that's especially bad.
That sounds awful. I'm so sorry that this person went through it, and it's nice to hear that they have a clinical team and support system to help them heal from that.
Yeah. Do you want to read the next one?
Sure. This is from another anonymous listener who says, "The trauma is so great. So I was in an outlier cult that was not quiverful. They believed that the end of days was going to be so horrible that people should not have children. Men would have vasectomies. I've heard there were abortions." And they want to clarify. Very pro-choice here, just noting this as it's not the norm for high control evangelical nationalism Christianity. Members of the church would testify in great detail about how children would be beaten till their brains would come out. I had to sit and listen to this at the age of 5. Yeah, I'm scarred for life.
This is crazy. I've never seen the premillennial futurism cross-pollinating with antinatalism.
Yeah. Anonymous, if you would like to, you can, if this cult has a website, we'd like to take a look at it. This is really interesting and different.
Please send this to us, because actually, if this is, I mean, like, I would legitimately consider doing an episode about this.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
This seems so trauma aside, this seems so interesting.
Yeah, this one really caught my attention when you put it in our Google Doc, because I don't know what the age of this anonymous listener is. You know, they could be 20 years older than me, or even a little bit older than that. But within most likely 10 to 20 years of when they were sitting in church hearing this, I was sitting in church hearing about children being beaten until their brains would come out also.
Yeah, that's not...
Sorry. But the conclusion in the IFB was, so the answer is have lots of kids and make sure they get saved as young as possible so that they'll get raptured and they won't get their brains beaten out. It's interesting also, I remember, Gavi, you said something during our Rapture series about, it's like these people relish hearing about pain and destruction falling on other people and not on themselves. And this is maybe a little bit different, because this is kind of sort of fantasizing about pain and destruction falling upon themselves. But there is a through line in that the pain and destruction that they fantasize about is always aimed at the most vulnerable.
I mean, because in the Left Behind movies, they make a clear point. All the children are gone. Where are all the children? Just so that they, I think that's kind of to like set themselves apart from a belief sort of like this, that, oh, well, the children are all going to get like beaten and murdered and their brains are going to fall out.
Yeah, I think we talked about this in our Revelation series. There are a lot of different theories on what happens to children at the time of the rapture. I think in the IFB teaching, though, they still believe, and I know in the Left Behind series, they still believe that children can be born after the rapture, because during the events of the Left Behind series, a character has a baby.
I suppose if all of the Christians get raptured up into heaven, then there's going to be no issue getting legal abortion, is there?
Huh.
I also think that this is weird because, like, I have friends who are really into the whole antinatalism thing, to the point where it's like kind of a core part of their identity, but these people also do tend to be not religious.
Yeah.
Like, they tend to be atheists, and so seeing antinatalism in a religious context is extremely odd. I do know that Heaven's Gate kind of went into that territory, but I've never seen it outside of very specific environments.
Yeah, usually when you see antinatalism associated with the cult, you also see prohibitions on sex in general.
Yes.
It's more like, don't have kids because that would be proof that you're having sex, which is something you're not supposed to be doing.
Or like only the leader gets to have children. All of your children must be children at like the
David Koresh, Jim Jones, right?
All your wife are belong to us. And what's his name? Warren Jeffs with the
right. And even in the FLDS, I think other people were allowed to have children.
It's just if they were men, male children would get like excommunicated when they were teenagers, so they wouldn't be
in the way.
A threat. Yeah.
Right. So it is a really interesting combination. I'm not sure why that would lead to people. So I can see why it would lead to people having vasectomies or preventing pregnancy. It is really wild that it would lead to people terminating pregnancies as well.
I want to know what Bill Gothard would think of this. I'm curious.
You said what Bill Gothard would think of this?
I mean, I know that he would be extremely against it, but also like, I kind of want to see his reaction to it.
I feel like he would say, well, you're going to bring down the wrath of God in the end times by refusing God's gift of children.
Yeah, he would say that it's against the design principle or the the submission principle or whatever his...
Yeah, something like that, probably.
Yeah. Speaking of the Left Behind series, I do... can I read this one from Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this letter from Sarah says, I remember reading through the Left Behind series. I started reading the first few books in middle school and then read each book from the following indwelling onward as soon as I could get my hands on it. I'm very much the kind of person that needs to know what is going to happen, and the Bible is so vague, so my teenage self just took the books as a pretty close approximation to what was going to happen in the future. As many funny kids did, I had moments of anxiety when the house was empty and such, and I would have to reassure myself that I did pray the prayer and believed. But I also had a lot of anxiety about being raptured. Like, what if I was doing something sinful or embarrassing when the rapture happened? What were we going to do in heaven while the world is being tortured for not believing? I felt a lot of panic about the people I love who would be left behind with all of that. And I also felt a lot of anxiety about not being brave enough to share my faith with people and would have blood on my hands. I also had a lot of fear about being presented to God and the idea that my life would be played on a big screen a la Jack Chick, This Was Your Life, and everyone would see all the bad things I'd done, even though God had forgiven me. People always seem to be excited about the rapture happening, but I never was, and I felt guilty about that.
Ooh, that last line hit hard.
So you weren't excited for the rapture when you were a kid?
No, the rapture was like the scariest thing that could possibly happen. Because you probably get to go to heaven, but then you die. Not die, you don't get to live the rest of your life on Earth. So if you have a Six Flags trip next week, all you can think about is the rapture going to come before my Six Flags trip? Because I really want to go to Six Flags.
So, were adults excited about the rapture, though?
I think they portrayed themselves to be. I don't know how they really felt.
So you were afraid of the rapture coming, but you couldn't say that you were afraid of the rapture coming openly. Right,
because then you have nothing to be afraid of because you're saved, right? Or are you not saved?
But other people, but you didn't have anyone who you could talk to and say, I'm afraid of this.
No, because all you would get is the same answer over and over again. Well, let's make sure you're saved.
I can only imagine that everybody else would have the same reaction as you.
I don't know.
Because we've heard from so many people that were deathly afraid of the rapture coming.
Yeah.
And being I can't tell anyone that I'm afraid of the rapture coming. So did anybody ever say to you that they were afraid of the rapture coming?
Yes, my childhood best friend when I was still living in Iowa, and I told her how to get saved so she wouldn't be afraid of it anymore.
Were you afraid of the rapture coming when she told you this?
Probably.
Man, that's so insidious because it just keeps people this is the only viable answer.
And then even if you're not afraid for your own salvation, Sarah said it in this letter, you're worried about people who are going to be left behind. And you're worried that you missed somebody that you were supposed to witness to, and now their blood is going to be on your hands. And even though you are saved and you do get to go up in the rapture, when the judgment seat comes and your life is played before God and everybody who's ever lived on earth, you're going to be embarrassed and have blood on your hands because you were supposed to give a tract to the fast food worker that one time and you didn't do it. So you know how there's a lot, there's a meme format that's a person in bed trying to sleep and their brain is talking to them and keeping them awake. Usually it references remember that one time you spilled coffee on your shirt right before you gave a big presentation back in middle school, Yeah. It's usually referencing minor embarrassing situations that plague people. It's like that all the time, But what if I was supposed to witness to that guy that I saw walking down the street the other day and I didn't do it, and now he's going to die and go to hell, and everybody's going to know that it was only because I was lazy or only because I was ashamed of Jesus?
That's
And it's really painful. And I think that contributes. I know that not being able to rest, not being able to heal or take time for oneself is something that we talked about with Tia. That's something that comes up a lot on this podcast. And I think this is a related concept because I was sitting on a park bench and resting and relaxing because I had a long day. But I didn't stand up to walk across the park to give somebody a tract and witness to them. And that makes me lazy. And because I was lazy, that person is going to die and go to hell. And how horrible of a person am I to prioritize resting my feet after a long day over somebody's eternal soul? They can never get that back, all because I wanted to sit on my backside for an extra minute. And you see how quickly that spirals into self-loathing, how quickly that spirals into branding yourself as I am fundamentally bad and lazy. And you train yourself out of seeking out rest.
So if you feel like this extreme level of self-hatred and self-loathing, do you feel like that you have to like work extra hard or do something extra to make up for it?
No, I think it's don't make the mistake in the first place. So if you're sitting on a park bench and you think you hear the Holy Spirit telling you to go witness to somebody, you just get up and do it. Because you can't make up for it. If that person dies and goes to hell because you didn't witness to them, there's no way you can make up for that. Even if you go get 10 other people saved and they all go to heaven, that one guy still died and went to hell and it's still your fault. So it's really more like, don't be lazy even one time.
I know we've been doing this show for 4 years. Shout out to our 4th anniversary of our first episode coming out, which was like a week ago. The singularity of the brain focus thing, that still gets to me. That still seems almost incomprehensible to me after doing this show for so long.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know, what would you call it? Brain training or maybe even brainwashing. Conditioning people to think a certain way about the world over and over and over again. And the first time you're exposed to it, it sounds a little bit wild. But after being exposed to that same concept hundreds and hundreds of times, it just becomes a part of the architecture of your brain.
Well, it's the thought control thing where if you're you have to filter every single thought and every single piece of information you get through.
Yep, but I take under my body and bring it into subjection.
Anyway, let's go take up the offering, and then we'll come back and read some more letters.
Sorry, did I trigger you?
A little. I mean, not totally, but just like my brain gets exhausted thinking about these things.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a break.
Yeah.
Hey, Sadie here. If this is your first time listening to the Leaving Eden podcast, make sure you go back and check out episode 57. It's a primer episode for new listeners. That episode tells my personal story and gives you all the terms and information that you'll need to know going forward. Also, check out our cult true crime series, The First Family of Fundamentalism, so that you can get the whole cult story. If you like our show, you can support us by joining our Patreon, where we have extended and uncensored episodes as well as other bonus content available. You can also join in the discussion in our Facebook group. That group is called Eden Exodus. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell your worst enemy. The Leaving Eden podcast is a fully independent podcast, and we really appreciate your support. Now, back to the show.
We are back from our break. So we have another story from an anonymous person. Would you like to read this? Would you like me to read this? I read the last one.
I'll do this one.
You can do this one. Cool.
Okay. My dad was a pastor, and he just got a new church. I was still attending our old church, so when I went to visit for the day, it was a new environment. They were having puppets, popcorn, and all that for neighborhood kids on a Saturday. I was hanging out by myself in the church building, not paying any mind to what was happening. I decided to walk around, and I couldn't find anyone. All the vehicles were there, but no people. I walked around and convinced myself the rapture came. I didn't see clothes, though, so that threw me off. I was in sheer panic. About 20 minutes later, the church buses pull up in the parking lot with all the volunteers and the neighborhood kids. I told my dad I freaked out and thought the rapture came. He asked me, of course, if I thought I was right with God, because it could happen any day. It became a joke of ours throughout the years, the time I thought I was left behind.
Seems like Dad was light years ahead in the turning trauma into a joke department.
I'm glad you had me read that one, because that's something my dad would probably have joked about, yeah.
But that's the real question. So this person is 100% sure that if the rapture comes, then the clothes are going to be left behind as well.
That seems to be so common. And we didn't find that in Revelation because the rapture's not in there.
When John of Patmos gets zoomed up into heaven, he doesn't say that he's naked.
Right. Or that he gets new clothes. There's got to be something about this.
He doesn't say, I was dressed in like robes that are amazing or something like that.
Yeah, because, okay, so there's quite a bit in the Bible that does not talk about this, but people think it does. So, okay, point number one, when Jesus was resurrected, the grave clothes or the wrappings that his body was wrapped in were left behind in the tomb. When he appeared to the Marys and Martha, and then when he appeared to his disciples later, he was clothed, but in brand new clothes. So the implication is that clothes come with the glorified body. So when you get resurrected or raptured, that body automatically comes with clothes. So you wouldn't need the clothes that you got raptured in. And then also, it's a neat workaround. So if you got raptured while you were wearing something immodest, then God can cover you up real quick.
What kind of clothes are we talking about here?
Robes, Bible robes.
Bible robes,
yeah.
Okay.
That are very distinct between men and women, as we have learned on this podcast.
I am wondering, though, like, does God update the fit, like, over time?
I don't know. So what it always was is it will be back in robes as in Bible times, where you could very easily tell men and women apart at a long distance, because men wore robes, but they were shorter robes, and women wore robes all the way down to the ground. But I wonder if maybe what people were wearing in Abraham's time and what people were wearing in Jesus's time were maybe different.
Right, because those were 1,000 or so, 1,500 years apart, something like that.
Something like that.
So, I mean, that would be like saying we live in America, and so we're wearing the same thing that they were wearing in America in the year 500.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is what we're wearing.
No. That's something that I had not considered until you brought it up. So I do wonder, what Bible days?
I think that, and also like, where are they living? Because I do get the feeling like when they're in the Babylonian exile, they're going to be wearing something different than if they're living in Judea. If they're in Egypt, they're going to be wearing something different than they would if they were in like Ethiopia.
Right. All we have really is the scripture says that Jesus was clothed when he appeared in his resurrected body. When the Bible talks about, in Revelation, when it talks about the saints, it always talks about them being clothed in white robes, clothed in white linen. And then when it describes Jesus coming back, or probably Jesus, or not quite clear, but almost certainly Jesus coming back on a horse. Sorry, I'm still caught up in how incredibly vague all of that Son of Man stuff is. I was led to believe it was like so crystal clear, and it is not. When Jesus comes back on a white horse, he has a white robe. So that is what makes people think that the clothes will be left behind, and we will all be clothed in white robes.
I do think that if I got to go to heaven, they wouldn't let me wear the same clothes as Jesus or the saints.
See, I think it would be like, what is that movie?
This Is the End?
Yeah.
Where they get Backstreet Boys.
Backstreet Boys in heaven, yeah. And everybody up there is wearing white, but like whatever would have been in fashion at their time.
It's just a thing that I'm thinking, like, if you wanted to be wearing something very specific, what if you just don't like white, if white's just really not your color?
I personally think I look terrible in white.
Most people look decent in white. I guess you don't think that you look very good in white. I like wearing white. I wear white linen. Like, I have a outfit that I wear sometimes that's entirely white linen.
I don't think I look good in white because I have yellow undertones.
Valid.
Yeah, I think I always feel like it makes me look jaundiced or like fake tan, but not real tan, which is fair because it is a fake tan, but I don't like the color that it makes me appear.
No, I think that if you have to be allowed to wear jewel tone robes or like black robes or
black is probably robes. Satanic.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Who knows? Time for the next story.
We can go to the next one, but I do want to point out I think we didn't talk about so much about the clothes being left behind when we did our Rapture series, and I'm so glad that you pointed that out because I never thought about how that's something that has totally been added to the Christian canon.
It is like assumed as a given from everywhere. Like every single piece of Rapture media that we've seen, the clothes get left behind.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is from Luke. Luke says, summer camp, mid-1980s. I was 12 at the time. The evening service sermon was about the rapture, with almost everyone going forward at the invitation to be sure that you know 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 that you know.
Mm-hmm.
Probably asked Jesus into your heart. The stakes could not have been higher. An hour or so after the service ended, a camp employee went running cabin to cabin to tell us that there was a tornado warning. Oh no. They had everyone, about 400 kids plus counselors, line up in the dark and go through an access door that led under the swimming pool. Lots of paint-peeled pipes and sweaty middle schoolers, but apparently one church group, not mine, realized that they were missing somebody. A youth director braved the tornado, and we all saw him return with this poor kid who was red-faced and sobbing. No one laughed or teased because we all simultaneously understood what he'd just experienced. That with the Rapture sermon still fresh in our minds, the tornado passed us over, but the damage was done. So this poor kid...
Oh, man.
There's a tornado warning. This poor kid wakes up and everyone's gone.
Yeah, like right after a Rapture sermon.
Man.
And and it's cloudy and stormy and ominous looking outside. Have you ever been in a tornado?
I've never been in a tornado.
Tornadoes look kind of like a big thunderstorm, and there can be sometimes thunder and lightning associated. The weird thing is it will look so like there's a specific feel to the air. There's a humidity, like a stickiness to it, usually. And then the sky turns the most obnoxious green. Like, when it's not blue, it's green. That's a problem.
I guess I've never lived in the part of the country that gets tornadoes.
Yeah, so living in southern Illinois, this was something that happened just all the time. I've lived in Iowa, and then I've also lived in southern Illinois, so I've been through a fair few tornadoes.
I mean, I've seen the aftermath of a tornado, and it looks like no joke. It looks legitimately terrifying.
So how they say it sounds like a freight train going over your head?
Yes.
I think that's extremely accurate. So I've been under many, many, many tornado watch, tornado warning, seen not funnel clouds, but seeing the clouds kind of starting to do a concerning spiral sort of thing. Plenty of times. But the one time that I was actually in the path of a tornado, I was living in a trailer behind the church where we lived in southern Illinois. And the trailer, I would say, was maybe 20 feet behind the back of the church. The tornado winds went through that alley between the trailer and the church and ripped 2 800-pound air conditioning units off the roof of the church. So it was very loud and very scary. And then my dad came and got me and said, we have to bail out the church. So then I went over to the church and got a bucket and bailed out the fellowship hall.
Did you feel like, I mean, because so the tornado goes right between the church and the trailer.
Yeah.
Did you feel like, wow, God spared us in that moment?
I wasn't sure because God did take our air conditioners and that did cost a lot of money.
Well,
So it felt more like a warning from God. Because if God had been wanting to show mercy and not get us, then the air conditioners would have been okay. So it felt more like I'm going to get you next time if you don't shape up.
That's scary. I'm just trying to imagine like everything in my life getting filtered through the, is God sending me a warning? Is God sending me, and then living through something like that?
Yeah.
Ooh.
And I wonder what they told these poor kids at camp.
Right. I mean, at least they had a safe place to take them all, like underneath the swimming pool. Underneath the swimming pool seems like if you're going to go somewhere in a tornado, that's the place.
And Luke doesn't seem to mention whether the counselors scaremongered them more afterwards or not. So we could hope that they didn't.
Right. It seems from the letter, the tone that I get is that people were just like, okay, now the work is done. We don't really need to, make a greater impression, but
that's awful. I wonder if that kid still remembers it, because it made enough impression on Luke that Luke still remembers it all these years later.
Oh, I'm sure that kid remembers it. That kid has got to remember it. There's no way that kid doesn't remember it.
That kid is either an evangelist or like fully deconstructed.
There's no in between. That kid is either like Bible college and like Fundy married and 8 kids.
Yeah.
Or
if you are that kid, please write in. We would love to hear your side of the story. This story is from listener Jonathan, who says, my parents took me to a presentation at a Christian camp in 1980 that wove in the aligning of the planets with Star Wars, the Age of Aquarius, and the U.S. base at Pine Gap in Central Australia to prove that the Rapture would take place in 1984.
Woo!
That would not have been funnier if you did it as a Mad Lib. Spoiler alert, it didn't happen, and the boss of that camp was charged with child sexual abuse offenses about 10 years later. Totally unrelated incidents, but follows the typical Fundy clergy trajectory.
When they're talking about Star Wars, are they talking about like Star Wars the movie, or are they talking about Star Wars the putting weapons in space program to beat the Soviets?
In 1980?
In 1980.
Could be either.
Well, I guess Ronald Reagan wasn't president yet, so it wouldn't have been...
So it would have been the movie? So, okay, so we hit Star Wars, but the Age of Aquarius was also mentioned in this listener letter. Believe it or not, I have heard the Age of Aquarius being connected to the Rapture.
Interesting. So I didn't know that the Age of Aquarius was an actual thing outside of the song, but...
Side note, my great-grandpa loved that song.
Oh, he loved it?
Yeah.
Where was it? That song was from...
Like 68.
From 68?
Right?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've only heard the song once or twice. It's one of those songs that felt like... I think that like in the like the music from that era that I got was via my parents, and my parents were kind of like anything that was like too pop, or anything that was not like too pop, but anything that was like, I feel like they were kind of the 70s and like late 60s, early 70s version of hipsters, where something that was like the Age of Aquarius would have been, they would have seen that as schlocky and they wouldn't have liked it.
Yeah. Because I know your parents liked, Simon and Garfunkel and Joni Mitchell.
Yes. My dad's favorite was Simon and Garfunkel and like Bob Dylan, and my mom loved Joni Mitchell. But like, I mean, something like that is something that was deemed to be more on the easy listening side of things. They would have not been into that at all.
So the story is my great-grandpa lived with my grandparents when my dad was in high school. So my dad was kind of roommates with his grandpa during his senior year of high school, and great-grandpa was known for having blasting Age of Aquarius louder than you would possibly imagine it could be played in his room, because that was like his favorite song.
That's such a specific song.
I know.
I listened to it. It's not a bad song. It's a perfectly fine song, but it just feels so random that would be like your song.
I know. But
Yeah.
that's one of the things that this is the same great grandpa who got the hat from Bear Bryant.
That's cool. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
But it is a thing outside of the song. It's an actual astrological thing.
Right. I had to look this up. According to the internet, there are different astrological ages, and the cause of this is that one day is not exactly 24 hours, but it is actually 23 hours and 56 minutes. So over time, and like we correct for this in the calendar or something. We have leap years and leap days and whatever and what have you. And over time, the planets and the stars that we face, because of this, we face them during different times of the day or different months of the year. And so one age lasts roughly 2,160 years. And the age of Aquarius is supposed to bring light and understanding to the people of Earth, and everybody is going to be happy forever. Unfortunately for us, it is not agreed upon when this will actually begin, but it is like depending on who you ask, either the current age that we're in now and it like started not too long ago, or it is the next age that we are going to be going into.
Yeah. So I heard this referenced in the IFB the other way around. So what we were hearing about is the age of Aquarius is modern astrological religion. It's new age, and it's a prediction that Satan is going to take over the earth.
So as an Aquarius, did you feel like having your astrological sign so deeply linked to Satan's reign on Earth was like an unfair disparagement of Aquariuses?
So I wasn't allowed to be interested in astrology. So at the time, I didn't care. I do feel like Aquariuses are unfairly disparaged in pop astrology as a whole, but not by being tied to Satan's hypothetical reign on Earth.
I didn't know that Aquariuses were so maligned. That's interesting, because I always heard that Aquariuses were like the vibe I always got was that you guys are like the cool kids, right?
Yeah.
That you guys are, that I'm like, oh, I'm not cool enough to hang out with you. Your humor is too dry.
Okay. See, what I think I often hear about Aquarius is they think they're cooler than they are. Like, they are extremely cool, but they also think they're even cooler than they are, and they're kind of snobs.
I mean, I can see that, I guess. I don't know.
And I think, like, to me, my number one way to characterize Aquarians is the mama bear personality. It's, you mess with me, I'm not going to do anything about it, but you mess with somebody that I feel protective of. I'm an intensely protective person.
And it goes full like, oh, you talk about my family, let's do Kendrick Lamar Drake disses.
Exactly. So that's that's another facet of what people think Aquariuses are that maybe resonates with me better. I don't know. But I think people always want to do the Aquarians are snobs without doing also the Aquarians will fight anybody for you at any time.
No, I do think it's interesting to see that that premillennialism and astrology cross over with each other, because like in all of the Jack Chick comics that I've ever read, astrology is new age spirituality and is part of Satan's plan. Yeah.
So it's interesting to see this has been the episode of like weird things go with premillennialism that you wouldn't think go with premillennialism.
I would love to do another episode, because like, I mean, we had the Jim Jones one that we did 2 years ago where Jim Jones was like premillennialist, but he thought that the rapture was going to be, or like the end of days was going to be like the communist revolution.
Yeah, something like that.
Things that you wouldn't think go with premillennialism, but that are going with premillennialism here. I think that would be very interesting to do an episode on those.
That would be interesting.
Also, when I'm back in town, we should go see an astrologer together and do an episode about it like they did on Ono, Ross, and Carrie.
Okay. Are we just stealing their content now?
Why not? I mean, astrology is different from everybody, so it'll be different content for us than it would be for them, you know?
That's true.
It's done as an homage. It's not done as like a ripoff, I hope.
I hope so, too. Ross and Carrie influenced me to start deconstructing, are a major part of my life for over 10 years, are hugely important and influential in the way that I think about the world, and then I plagiarize them and get sued.
They wouldn't sue you.
I have not been sued by Ross and Carrie. I'm just paranoid.
I don't think they would sue you. They
don't
seem like nice people.
I don't think they would sue me, but Scientology might.
If we joined Scientology just like they did, you know what? Their whole thing is we show up so you don't have to, and I am good with letting them take the heat on that one.
Yeah, I have thought about going in to do the Scientology personality test, but Ross and Carrie showed up, so I don't have to.
Yeah, it seems like it's fake. Is it your turn or my turn?
I think it's my turn. Want me to do one more before the break?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Sadie and Gavi. Maria uses she, her, and he, him. Well, let me get it right. Maria uses he, him, and she, her pronouns from New Mexico.
Some fluidity going on in here.
That's fun. I grew up in a very conservative Catholic family in Virginia. I got more demonology, satanic panic, and exorcism garbage than the Rapture stuff as a kid, but both were heavily present in my upbringing, and sometimes they overlapped in frightening ways. Even though my parents did their best to protect me from the scariest stuff until I was an older teenager, that made the information I did hear as a small child seem more true and real to me. Even as a deconstructed young adult, the wrong word at the wrong time could still make me question everything I'd worked to pull myself through. For example, the night before I moved away from home to Ohio when I was 26, my mom crept into my bedroom after I'd gone to bed. She sat on my bedside and told me very gently that we are in the end times, and that sometime very soon, God would allow the world to be engulfed in darkness for 3 days. When that happened, I was supposed to close all the blinds, lock the doors, and whatever I did, not to look outside. I needed to shut myself in a closet or a windowless room for all 3 days and pray. She gave me a blessed 48-hour emergency candle and a bottle of holy water for protection, and made sure that I left home with a rosary. Thankfully, I was already deep into my deconstruction by then, and I had the sense to jokingly ask her what I was supposed to do for the last 24 hours after the candle went out. She scolded me and worried that she needed to find me another magical candle. Poor sweet ma. But I hardly could sleep for a week, and I still have the emergency candle. On the one hand, it's practical. On the other, this still scares me. Your episode about Padre Pio helped with some of those fears, though. Thanks for all your research and work on the pod.
Dear Lord, not dragging the mom for only giving them a 2-day candle instead of a 3.
Okay, I'm also kind of concerned about the instruction of shut yourself in a closet and light this candle for 3 days.
Yeah, like what if you need to use the bathroom?
I mean, I was more worried about carbon monoxide poisoning. Because you could lock yourself in a bathroom. The bathroom is typically a windowless room. So that would work fine, as long as it's a bathroom with no windows.
If it was a bathroom, then you could turn the lights on.
Maybe you could, unless the world is engulfed in darkness, and that means that there's no electricity either. Which, again, is going to come back around to being a problem if you have a candle lit in an enclosed space.
Or maybe it would have, like, I mean, you could have a bathroom with, like, with, like, frosted glass. So you can, like, some light can come in, but...
No, the mom specified windowless.
Windowless, okay.
I think he's just... or needs more magical candles, and let's hope that magical candles don't have carbon monoxide in them.
I mean, is there, like, a bucket in the closet? That's the question that I have.
I guess mom was expecting some prep work from their kid. I don't know. That is a lot, Maria. And it's nice to have a reminder that the apocalyptic stuff goes outside of Protestantism or evangelicalism at times.
I mean, it's like the Casa Bonita South Park episode when Butters has to go in the bunker.
Yes. But it's nice to hear that our Padre Pio episode was helpful. I liked that episode. I didn't want to come down on, like, this is all fake. or this is all real. Because I wanted to talk about how it's a little bit deeper than that. People experience things differently. There's a reason that people experience things that seem to be miraculous. There are things that we can learn from this that are a lot, in my opinion, a lot more important than this is all real or this is all fake. And I'm glad I was able to help.
When we came out with that episode, a couple of people were not happy.
Yeah.
Just one or two people.
Some of them are related to me.
I reached out to a friend of ours who is very Catholic, and I asked him about, I'm like, what's the deal with Padre Pio? And he was like, ugh. That was kind of his response to it.
Yeah.
He's like, I mean, he's a saint, but like, I don't know.
You want to take up the offering one more time?
Yeah, and then we've got, I think, three more stories.
To finish up.
3 more to finish. Okay. We are back from our break. Thank you guys so much. We've got 3 stories left of Rapture trauma. Your Rapture trauma. Hot and direct like a Little Caesars pizza.
Get it hot like Papa John.
Get it hot like Papa John. It's a trauma-nomenon.
So as someone who spent, I was having a little bit of a tough day yesterday, and I was listening to Chapel Roan mashups, and my favorite one right now is a mashup of Hot to Go with the YMCA song.
Oh, that was
Did I send that to you?
I heard that one. Yeah.
I think I sent that to you. And now I want Leaving Eden Traumanomenon mashups real bad.
I'll tell my buddy. I have a buddy who runs a company that does like AI music covers of stuff. Like he has a company where you can like upload your voice into it, and then you can upload the voice of somebody else, and it will put your voice over theirs on a song. Maybe I'll see if I can get him to, or if we can like get somebody who's like doing that to like do a Chapel Roan Traumanomenon.
Yeah.
I don't know. We might be in legally dubious territory here. AI is very specifically is useful for some very specific things, and the very specific things that it's useful for are also things that don't make a lot of money.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm listening to you, but I'm also doing RAPTURE.
Jesus will come back for me.
Oh, what's it take to get salvation? What's
Baby, do you like this prayer? I made it so you'd
made it so I'd get up there, maybe?
Made it so I'd get up there. It's 280 degrees when I'm burning in hell. Burning in hell.
RAPTURE.
RAPTURE. Jesus will come back for me. RAPTURE. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, did we just hurt more people's feelings or make more people really happy? What's the percentage?
I think it's usually 50-50 on those. Some people are upset. Some people are happy.
We try to hit 50-50.
Dude.
Okay, let's... Thank you once again for subscribing to our Patreon. I'm not sure why we did all of our Patreon bits, like, immediately after offering breaks on this episode.
Oh, that's not going on Patreon. That's going on normal.
Oh, is that going on streaming?
That's going on stream.
Okay, let me try that segue again then. Streaming listeners, this is a taste of what you get on Patreon.
My name is Gracie, and my pronouns are she, her. Here is my story. Picture this. Shirts and pants draped over the back of kitchen chairs and milk spilled on the table. Dun, dun, dun. Every light in the house on and untouched. Full cereal bowls. This could be the beginning of some really creepy thriller movie. But this is, in fact, an elaborate prank prank designed around my family's
Oh, no.
rapture anxieties or lack thereof? Question mark? Or lack thereof? The date is December 21st, 2012, allegedly the end of the Mayan calendar that the Mayan people created back in 3114 BC. For a lot of people, I grew up around this was a big deal. I wish I knew why. People thought that we would be raptured or that the world would just end. A family in our neighborhood had an end of the world party that night. I really wanted to go to the party, but my parents were very strict about magic and witchcraft. Blech. They said it was an unchristian and wrong to put stock in pagan stuff like the Mayan calendar. So instead of going to the party, my parents came up with their own plan. My grandfather was supposed to come visit us that day, so my mom decided to play a prank on him. She set the scene in every room of the house. What would have happened if our family was plucked right out of their socks and transported up to heaven, and then we all went to hide, with our poor dog pacing around the house all confused. This is the most upsetting part to me. As a 10-year-old, I wanted the dog to go to heaven with us. Yeah, you're right. My grandpa came into the house and poked around silently. I don't remember if it was me or my younger brother who burst out of the bedroom and revealed to him that we were still, in fact, on Earth. Nothing can really rattle my grandfather, but he did seem very, very confused. And who knows why playing a prank on an old man is less demonic than going to a party with our neighbors, but that's a question for my parents.
Wow.
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Not playing the rapture prank on Grandpa.
This is a really mean prank. I have heard of this going down at Hyles Anderson, like, frequently in the boys' dorms. This is apparently something that Hyles Anderson preacher boys, at least back in the day, did to each other all the time.
Kids do this type of stuff to each other. Like young adults. Ooh. Like, I do think back to like some of the stuff that we did to each other as kids. And I think that now that it's like low key horrible and abusive and like borderline psychopathic, but we thought it was funny because we were kids. I think adults playing this kind of prank on Grandpa, that's different.
Yeah, that is a weird prank to play on Grandpa.
Grandpa of all people, give him a heart attack.
Yeah, I don't think. Then again, I'm a terrible prankster. I love the idea of pranks, but can never pull them off.
Your dad was a prank guy.
Yeah, my dad was a prank guy, but it was more like low-key gaslighting. My dad's pranks were like getting to Six Flags and then telling us that he forgot, or that we were supposed to bring the tickets. So he'd ask me if I had the tickets and say I was the one who was supposed to have the tickets. And then he'd ask my brothers and he'd ask my mom and he'd go looking for them. Sometimes he would even pull out of the parking lot. And then he'd flip his mirror down and they'd be in his mirror.
And he could keep the bit going?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was stuff like that. Or when he told us that the inventor of the fork was named John Henry Forkus. And he had this. You stand right there. Hold on a second. What do you need, bud? Oh, you want to say hello? Okay, ladies and gentlemen and everyone else, we have a special guest joining us. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, Chuck.
Can you hear me?
They can hear you. Hold on. I'm going to put the headphones on her head. There you go.
Hello?
Hey, Chuck.
Can you say thank you
Thank you.
for listening
Listening.
to Leaving Eden podcast?
I don't know podcast.
It's perfect. Thank you, baby.
I don't know podcast.
Okay. Chuck says she doesn't know podcasts and she just wants to say thank you. I did also want to talk about the Mayan calendar thing, though, because I heard the same thing, but with an extra layer.
Really?
Yeah. So the layer that I heard is the rapture will almost certainly not come on December 21st, 2012, because everybody's looking for it, and it's coming at a time when nobody's looking for it.
That must have been excellent for your anxiety.
Yeah, it was. I remember walking around that day with the pep in my step because I thought, wow, at least it's not today.
And I suppose it couldn't be like the day after or the day before, because if it was the day before or the day after, then everyone would say, well, you know what? Like, I mean, they almost got it.
Right.
You couldn't even have it that whole month.
Yeah, I definitely remember feeling more confident. Like, oh, I guess we're good.
I remember being excited for that day, but because I was a Rush fan, because it was 21-12-12.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I do think, though, like, the Rapture prank on Grandpa is especially, like... I mean, I had a cousin that played the most awful prank on my grandma.
Oh, no.
She had macular degeneration, so she was legally blind, and she lived with his mom and dad. So so he lived with grandma. Grandma lived with him, and he was like either a late teenager or young adult at this point. And he went into the kitchen and moved all of the plates and cups and bowls into different cabinets than they used to be in.
Oh, no.
She's an
That's awful.
Prank.
That doesn't seem like a prank. That just seems like a bad thing to do. Did Grandma think it was funny?
I don't know. I was pretty young when this happened. I heard about it from my mom, and she was like, that's kind of a crazy thing for your...
I think I tried to Rapture prank somebody once, but I don't remember the details.
Do you think if somebody Rapture pranked you now that it would work or not?
Oh, it would absolutely work. Please don't do this to me. Yeah, well, the last time I thought the Rapture happened was when I was pregnant with Chuck. And I did a TikTok about this. At the time, I lived earshot from the river, and there would be boats on the river. So this particular night, it was foggy, and the boats were using their foghorns out on the river. So I heard this unfamiliar kind of trumpety sounding noise. Anyway, I heard the foghorn. It was the middle of the night. It was very quiet because, you know, it gets quieter when it's foggy because the moisture in the air dampens the noise. And I heard the foghorn, and I don't know why, but what I thought was, oh no, fetus Chuck is going to get raptured.
Just out of you.
I don't know why I thought I wasn't going up in my middle of the night pregnant sleeping state. I don't know why my concern wasn't for, you know, all of my lovely unsaved quote unquote friends and relatives. That was just what my brain went to. And I was really concerned for a minute, and then fetus Chuck did not get raptured. And now she's 3.5.
How wonderful.
Yeah.
I started telling people that, like, when people are saying that, when people would get like crazy about like the vaccine being the mark of the beast, I would tell them that that COVID was actually the mark of the beast, and that the vaccine was getting saved. Like I would go on Facebook, and when people were crazy about this, I would go on Facebook and argue otherwise to them, and they would like. You know,
it's actually a better analogy.
Just got a reverse Uno card, people.
Uh-huh.
Our next story is from Caroline. This one's yours to read.
Yeah. Caroline says, I've been a listener for a couple of years now and have really enjoyed your podcast. Listening to Sadie talk about her life is at times extremely relatable and at other times really alien. I grew up United Methodist, which is a pretty liberal denomination, at least compared to the fundamentalist and evangelical churches you talk about on the show. Church was a second home to me all of my life. While we didn't have Sunday night and Wednesday night services like the IFB, there were often activities and groups that I attended throughout the week. My parents were Sunday school teachers in the choir and often did other church-related activities as well. I was there at least twice a week, but some weeks it could be up to 4 times or more. The rapture was never a topic of discussion or a sermon at my church. I had no guidance from leadership on what to believe. Unfortunately, that did not provide any immunity against rapture trauma. When I was an older child and teenager, the Left Behind series, including the Left Behind Children series, was being released and gaining a lot of popularity. Yes, that's a real thing, Gabi. I read both, consuming them as eagerly as possible. My parents always encouraged me to read and were especially happy to buy me Christian fiction books, but they never stopped to tell me not to take it too literally or seriously. The only person to caution me was the parent of a childhood friend who told me it was just one interpretation of Revelation. When you've never heard any other interpretations, it's hard to imagine what they could be, especially when Revelation was rarely, if ever, referenced from the pulpit. When the characters in the book always prayed the same exact prayer to become saved, I started to worry and doubt if I was saved. So I said the prayer. I didn't feel any different, so I continued to wonder and worry. Over time, I prayed that prayer a few more times just to be sure. There were characters who went to church who were not saved until the rapture. Could I be one of those people? And so I began to fear the rapture. You might think that as a child attending a very loving, liberal church that I would be safe from rapture trauma, but I wasn't. I can't overstate how much Christian culture was about the rapture at that time, about how it permeated everything. When I was 13 years old, a counselor at my school asked to borrow my VHS of the Left Behind movie. There was nothing preventing me from believing it all to be true. Had my church ever addressed the idea of the rapture or different interpretations of Revelation, it might have lessened my fear. I am not a believer anymore, and haven't been for about a decade or more. In that time, I never thought to dig into Revelation or try to disprove the rapture. I no longer believed it was coming, but I was blown away by your series. This is the first time in my life, first as a believer, later a seeker of truth, and lastly a non-believer, that I've ever heard a non-futurist take on Revelation. Once I left Christianity behind, I just assumed Revelation was made up and I no longer feared the rapture. But if anyone had bothered to tell me as a child that Revelation could have meant all these other things, then I would not have feared the rapture so strongly.
Having watched like the Left Behind movies, both of them, I guess I made fun of that. And I made fun of it, but I never really realized how strong a cultural weapon they were to radicalize people who were not already that vein of Christian or did not have that kind of belief.
Yeah.
And how they were used to bootleg premillennialism into other forms of Christianity that didn't have premillennialism as part of their doctrine. Right.
And that's how the idea of the rapture got into mainstream Christianity to begin with, over 150 years ago.
Well, it's the same way that the IBLP and all of this quiverful stuff got into Southern Baptist churches.
Yeah. A unique combination of, well, this matches so many other things that I'm being told. Caroline growing up in the United Methodist Church, both of my parents were raised Methodist, and I worked for a Methodist church for a little while. They tend to be kind of casually biblical literalists. They'll say Jonah was swallowed by probably a big fish, not literally a whale. It doesn't literally have to be a whale, but he probably was swallowed by a big fish, or at least he thought he was. They tend to be kind of a laid-back biblical literalist, and Caroline was told that the Bible is literal. So when nobody said otherwise, that Revelation might or might not be, Caroline assumed Revelation is literal.
Yeah, I mean, Methodist is a very normie Christian denomination.
Hank Hill is a Methodist.
That does it.
That is all the explanation that should be needed.
The biggest difference that I've seen between, normie Christians and the really out there people is are we word for word literal, or are we just saying, is some stuff allowed to be prophecy or allegorical or metaphorical, or are we taking the general idea of this story and rather than the...
Right, or does it matter? Do we even need to discuss whether Jonah was swallowed by a whale or a big fish or something else or nothing at all? Or are we just supposed to learn a lesson from the story?
Yeah, what's the point? Why are we telling this story? Are we telling this story because Jonah was literally swallowed by a whale?
And in the IFB, it's Jonah was literally swallowed by a whale. There were probably no whales in the particular part of the world where Jonah lived, but God sent a special whale and miraculously made it happen because the Bible says whale, and therefore it was a whale. And the lesson from this story is everything. We can preach 10 different sermons about the lessons that we're supposed to learn from Jonah, but the important thing was it was really a whale.
And the whale was, for some reason, horny for Jonah's mother, which is what the Midrash would say about that story. I don't know.
Sorry, that's a new one to me.
Somebody was horny for one of the animals or something was horny for Noah's wife on Noah's Ark, and that's in the Midrash. We have one story left, and this one is from Megan. Hey, longtime listener, first time emailer. Leaving Eden is my favorite part of Monday mornings. Interesting. My favorite part of Monday mornings is Folgers in your cup. No, it's not.
Thank you, Megan. That's very sweet.
Thank you, Megan. I like watching regular car reviews, their YouTube drop on Monday morning, but that's just me.
You're terrible at self-promotion.
Regular Car Reviews is a great YouTube channel. Regular Car Reviews is my favorite YouTuber, and he is a gay furry that does car reviews, and he has a master's degree in English literature, and he talks about like media theory in his car reviews. It's an excellent channel.
Okay.
I'll send you one of his videos and you might find it interesting. You like, it helps if you know things about cars, but you don't have to know things about cars to watch his videos.
I mean, I know enough about car. I generally have the basic idea of how a combustion engine works and what parts are in there.
I mean, it's about like what this brand symbolizes and what this individual vehicle symbolized to the people that bought it and why it was made and this and that.
Oh man, that does actually sound really interesting.
I'll send you some regular car reviews videos. Highly recommend that channel. Also from Pennsylvania. A very Pennsylvanian show. A little bit of background to go with my trauma. I grew up regular evangelical and not fundy. My family is fairly conservative. My general trauma started when my Bible teacher showed us The Thief in the Night trilogy in 7th grade and ultimately led to a general anxiety disorder diagnosis. Oh no, I don't love that for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My main trauma story starts with a family friend who, like Gothard, never married, never had kids, but lectured my parents on marriage and parenthood. I've gotten no contact with her now, but I wouldn't be surprised if she's gone full Q now because she was always into some theory or another. That tends to happen. My 6th grade class had to choose a themed day for Spirit Week, and all the boys clamored for Scotland Day so they could wear kilts. Spoiler alert, they didn't. One classmate was going as Lady Di, and I realized that I could be Queen Elizabeth, which conveniently is also my middle name. My mom had bought me a dress for a father-daughter dance, and I'd been dying to wear it. Somehow, I mentioned all this to said family friend who said, "It's been prophesied that Queen Elizabeth will reign until Christ's return. She's going to hand her scepter directly to him." Since the Queen was about 80, if she lived to 100, I figured I had about 20 years left and panicked. I moved past it's kind of crazy. I moved past the panic, but whenever Queen Elizabeth's health was in the news, I prayed for her healing because I wasn't ready for the rapture. Cut to summer of 2022 when the Queen died. Never have I felt so relieved or giddy because this person wasn't right about everything after all. Not that I believed she was, but it was nice to have further proof. So that's my main rapture trauma story.
Wow.
For the most part, I've deconstructed that, though I can still scare myself by thinking about how eternity never ends. I still consider myself a Christian, but much more liberal than I ever thought I'd be. Anyway, thanks for listening, and thanks again for the pod, and thanks for the Emperor's New Groove reference. My siblings and I quote it all the time. Great movie. You should watch that one, Sadie. You got Disney Plus?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should watch it. Emperor's New Groove. Chuck would love it. So this leads me to the question, what is the weirdest event in the zeitgeist that you saw prophesied to be a harbinger of the rapture?
The weirdest, because I got all the basic ones, Y2K and Obama's inauguration. I had all the usual. I don't know what I'd say was the weirdest, though.
Okay, any of note, you think? That I don't want to say comparable to Queen Elizabeth dying, but
Well, the prophecy wasn't that she would die. The prophecy was that she wouldn't die until the rapture.
And that she would hand her scepter directly to Jesus. I wonder what what was the scriptural basis for this? Or why
Queen Elizabeth?
This?
Why not like every president and prime minister and royalty in the world.
Why not Queen Victoria, or why not,
Yeah.
any of the other...
Or Elizabeth the First.
That doesn't make any... It's this is silly. I mean, we've had the Mayan calendar being the...
Yeah.
We've had the Y2K, we've had the...
I do actually really like, though, how Megan wrote about this, because there's now proof that this Q possible person in Megan's life was not right about everything. And that is very much how I tend to cope with this stuff. To have actual proof, actual evidence that these people are not correct about everything. These people have been proven wrong before, and I don't have to worry about, when you're going to see signs of the rapture, you're going to see signs of the end times all over the place, because the signs are so vague and the signs are so much something that will always be happening. There are wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and inflation and sicknesses and disease. You will always see signs, but when you look at facts that conflict with these prophecies, you can gain perspective. Gaining perspective doesn't mean you have to quit believing in the rapture or believing in Revelation end times prophecy. It doesn't mean you have to keep believing in the rapture or Revelation end times prophecy. You can choose where you fall along that spectrum and still choose to give yourself the gift of not being freaked out, being worried about this, based on the actual evidence that we do have, which is that it hasn't happened yet, and it hasn't happened when anybody's predicted it yet.
You know how there's the technique that, like, say you're having a panic attack or something, and you need to, like, calm yourself down? One of the things that you can do is you can, like, proverbially, I don't want to say touch grass because that sounds kind of negative, but, like, do the thing where you say, okay, I see that object is that thing, I'm going to name that object, and you do that with a bunch of things in the room to kind of ground yourself back in reality.
Yeah.
This is kind of like the religious hysteria, conspiracy theory, prophecy version of that, where you can say,
like
this person's saying this thing's going to happen. They haven't been right before. We shouldn't keep listening to this person. They don't have a good track record.
Right.
Like, that is kind of like the grounding thing that you can do.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice, because look at the different rapture stories that we got in this episode. They are all over the board. And the other stories that we got there are so many of so many different kinds. There are so many different ways to scare somebody about the rapture or try to control somebody with fears about the rapture. But there's one method to not letting that fear run your life.
Yeah, and I also think that, like, and I've talked about this before when we've talked about the rapture, that if you're living in a time when you truly believe that the world is going to possibly come to an end, like, during the Cold War, or, when the threat of nuclear annihilation is, like, looming large over everyone, you can either be like, this is God ordained, or you can just be like, this is just something that I have to deal with the insane facts of reality, and it's easier to, in your brain go like, it's God ordained. But then if you still have that God ordained belief, it kind of takes a life of its own. And that's how we end up with all of these different weird permutations.
Oh, and the reality that is happening is always comforting to me, even if it's not the reality that I wish it were. Okay, I think we should probably wrap up because Chuck is ready for me to be done.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this pod. We will be back with you. You can follow the pod on Instagram and I guess on social media at Leaving Eden Podcast. You can follow me on social media at GAVRIELHACOHEN. Sadie, your socials?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram and Threads at Sadie Carpenter Music, and on TikTok at Sadie Carpenter 1.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
But old rolling river of time healed me in too many days. no regrets, no confusion. There'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways. I'm so thankful I decided